Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Richards, Technical Services Manager of the Managing General Agents Association. And on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our panel session briefing this afternoon. This is being hosted by Innovation Group on the subject of insourcing versus outsourcing for claims management. What's best for your business? Before I introduce our moderator, I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and camera are turned off. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Time allowing, these will be asked and answered at the end of the event. If we run out of time, questions will be answered post-event. This presentation is accredited for CPD hours if relevant to your ongoing professional development program. The briefing is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be issued post-event together with our feedback survey. Please take the time to complete our survey. It will take no longer than 2 minutes and allows us to deliver the best possible future events to our members. So as a recap, today's briefing is on the subject of insourcing versus outsourcing for claims management. What's best for your business from Innovation Group? So let me introduce you to our moderator, Gary de Groot. Gary joined the business in 2019 and is Growth Director at Innovation Group. He has worked his whole career in claims, having performed a number of roles across claims handling, account management and sales. Gary has worked alongside some of the UK's largest motor and property MGAs and has a detailed insight into what makes many of them so successful. So without further ado, enjoy the briefing, everyone, and Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. We're really excited about this. So again, thanks to the MGAA for hosting us to discuss insourcing versus outsourcing in relation to claims management. I think it's something that a lot of MGAs sort of talk about internally and have considerations over what's best for their business, some of the risks, some of the opportunities around that. I am very conscious that we are presenting this as an outsourced business. But we're going to try our best today to be as impartial and to just talk this through in a very sort of neutral fashion as we go through the points. So learning objectives for today, we're going to describe the benefits of insourcing versus outsourcing, explain some of the risks that are involved in both of these elements and choices that you guys have to make. We're going to have a look at how the current market dynamics should be influencing the decision making that you need to make. We've gone for a pretty turbulent time across both motor and property over the last couple of years, and indeed in insurance in general. How does that influence the decision making of your business? And then outline a little bit about what the future holds and how that looks for you guys and what considerations you need to make as we look into 2024 and beyond. So just to introduce the full panel, you've got myself here. We've also got Stuart Thornley, who is our Head of Growth for Property. Stuart's been with us nearly 2 years now, having previously worked at Crawford. Stu is a qualified lawyer, but we try not to hold that against him. And he comes with a really detailed and experienced background, looking across, having worked with so many MGAs and insurers across the last 10 years. We've also got Chloe Gunn, who's our Head of Growth for our motor business. Chloe's got a really unique perspective on this, having been claims manager for Ensley Insurance in a previous life. So having dealt with sort of the in-source, outsource element that a lot of you guys are facing, a lot of what we're discussing here, she's going to have a really unique perspective on some of the drivers, some of the challenges that she's seen historically, and indeed some of the benefits of both of those models as well. And our host today is Nikki Randhawa, who is an account manager here. Nikki, as it says on her bio, has 25 years experience working in the insurance and claims industry. She's looking forward to many comments from you guys telling her that she doesn't look old enough for that to be true. She's worked for insurers as a supply chain manager, so having dealt with a lot of the outsourced elements from that side, has also worked in the TPA and legal sector for the last sort of 10 years. So again, great perspective on what makes some of this work. We'll skip on because we're very conscious of the pictures on there making us look a little bit like a Steps tribute band. And we'll go straight over to you, Nikki, for our first question today.
Thank you, Gary. And yes, I have been in the insurance industry for 25 years and have seen the benefits and drawbacks of insourcing and outsourcing. So this is quite close to me personally. But as an IG is a key service provider to the insurance market, Gary, I would like to direct this question to you, but would also like the panel to contribute. What are the key considerations between insourcing and outsourcing?
Yeah, okay, so get straight into it, I guess. So look, I think we always discuss these sorts of things. It doesn't matter whether it's insourcing, outsourcing, or any great debate that we have across the industry. And we always say, and it's frustrating, that there isn't a right answer. And the reality is, in this subject, that there's not. I think it's going to be a personal, or I guess a probably better term is a business choice based on a number of assessment factors that you need to look at to decide what's better for you guys. I think it goes without saying that some services are better outsourced. So if you look at things like, technical loss adjusting, legal work, the reality is that most of the MGAs within the UK just don't have the volume going through to be able to insource that sort of stuff. And I think we'll probably come on later to talking about what sits best as an insource and outsource piece from some of the supply chain stuff. But looking, I guess, squarely at claims management, I think the benefit that many MGAs would cite in terms of in-housing claims management is that they get a greater degree of control over their claims. They're outsourcing to a partner, and whilst they'll have rigorous management tools to be able to assess how that partner is performing, I always think there's a notion that insourcing it gives just a greater degree of control over the claims that you've got for your business. But there are some risks that are attached to that too, which I think are really important to talk about. So things like, an IT system, which will need buying for claims management, and the upkeep of that IT system, development, changes to that as it goes on. Office space, if you're looking to set up a claims team and you don't want it to be remote, whether it's hybrid working or full-time in the office, that's certainly something that needs consideration. Resilience, I think if you look at the floods that we've had, the storm that we've had over the last couple of weeks, Babbitt, and the surge that brings in claims. If you're a property MGA that's looking at outsourcing, how does a 200% increase or 300% increase in volume affect you for that month? TPAs have not got people sitting around doing nothing. It doesn't necessarily work like that, but they've got a bigger business with greater resilience, having been through this historically, to try to be able to deal with some of that. And I always think about, if you're insourcing and you've got a team of 4 people for insourcing claims, if you have one person go off, that's 25% downturn. And that is really, really significant. Whereas a larger business, a larger organization can really suck that up across their 2, 3, 4, 500 people that they've got there to be able to deal with that. Quality as well. So again, thinking about things like large losses, fraud cases, again, how do you build that quality within your business to be able to deal with the more technical elements of claims handling if you're looking to insource that? That's certainly a question that I think MGAs need to pose themselves. Data is a really big piece. Have you got the system to be able to support your data appetite? I think even further than that, what TPAs can offer very often is, a cross-client or a cross-industry view of what's happening in terms of claims and data, whether that's through anonymized benchmarking or just some annotated notes about what they're seeing across the market. I think if you cut off your TPA and you're looking at insourcing, you do have to concede that you won't have access to that sort of vast amount of data to be able to spot emerging trends and actually know what good looks like across a class of MGAs. And I think that plays into probably the last point there, which is just the market understanding. Do you detach yourself from understanding what others are seeing in claims if you decide to insource it? So I think there are numerous benefits to this, which I think we'll discuss as we go on through the day, but there are a lot of risks as well. And I think when you're making this decision, it's not really just a case of saying we can control it better. And actually, we think it might be a little bit cheaper, because I think that can be slightly misleading. Again, as we'll probably come on to later, I think there are a lot of risk and opportunity factors that need to be considered and laid out as a business. Then looking at your claims profile, your claims volume, what an in-source team would look like, whether you've got office space to accommodate them, have you got a system that you can buy off the shelf or can develop already to be able to inform you to make that sort of decision.
That's a really balanced point of view, I would consider. I'd like to open that up to, say, Chloe and Stuart. Chloe, probably you more from a motor perspective. We've talked about what services lean better to outsourcing model and why, taking into account the motor industry.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I think fundamentally, when you're looking at this as a consideration between, insourcing and outsourcing, I don't think anyone is going to intentionally make a decision to outsource because they want to increase their cost base. So I think that's got to be the first and foremost thing in everyone's mind. You know, Gary, you talked about operational expense, scalability. You know, with my operational hat on, control is key, and being perhaps a control freak in my being, you know, I think that is, you know, one of the key things which will give you greater benefit. But, you know, scalability, operational expense are certainly key considerations you've got to think about. If you're looking specifically, you know, in respect of motor, you know, if you've got a scalable model, you know, my ideal solution would be if you can insource the main claims handling elements, but look to outsource the specialist and technical services. You know, you need to really think about where your cost control lies. You know, utilising an outsourced provider to complete some of the specialist services, you know, litigation, third-party intervention, recovery, you know, that's where you want to think about using perhaps dedicated specialist outsourced providers to help, you know, deliver on your core metrics. You know, you're going to be focused on controlling loss ratios. You know, where's your biggest spend? Where are the biggest risks? And those are some of the bigger areas I think, you know, you want to focus on. So I think, Nikki, really for me, you know, outsourcing has got to be in respect to those specialists and those technical areas. I think would, you know, prove to be more beneficial in my view.
Thank you for that. Stuart, would you like to expand upon Gary's and Chloe's?
Yeah, sure. I don't want to repeat what they've both said. I think probably the key thing that merits a bit of focus there for me, and Gary touched on it, is the access available when you're in an outsourcing model to specialist claims expertise, and then being able to strike that right balance in terms of what claims expertise you keep in-house as well. And that does tie back into everything that we're discussing in terms of your economies of scale when you're considering your outsourcing models and what you're going to insource as well. So, you know, insourcing might involve higher upfront costs, but when you're outsourcing, you can get cost savings from the economy of scale, from the breadth of expertise and people available, and much broader people base when you're in a time like we've mentioned recently with the recent storm, when there's a fluctuation in claim volume and you need to be able to rely on getting the right experts on the ground from the desk able to support customers and your claims processes. And that is a real key part of the balance here, and it is a balancing act for me. As Chloe said, you want to get the right expertise. You want legal panel involved when there are legal aspects or litigation aspects. You want to actually be able to leverage the right expertise that's out there in the market, and that can be a difficult balance because there's a real good reason to have an in-house claims function, I think, to give you the level of oversight, risk management, and control over your data, and equally customer satisfaction in the right way. But you do want to get the right expertise out there to support you. And I think, especially given the insurance market, one of the most common discussions we all have is how difficult it is to attract people to come and join us. You know, the most common thing everyone always says is that I fell into my career in insurance, which is, I think, a bad habit every insurance professional has. But it does pose some challenges for us in terms of attracting fantastic individuals with the expertise that you need, that see the career path, and then also just looking after them, training them up and keeping them upskilled whilst they're in-house as well. So the benefit of having an outsourced provider who's established with a market reputation, who's got their succession plans and the people there available to support you, is invaluable versus doing it from scratch.
Yeah, and Nikki, you asked there as well, what services lend better to outsourcing? And I think as we go through this, it's going to depend on the scale of the MGA, the volume that they've got coming through. If you've got 1,000 claims per annum, 500 per annum, I don't think it's probably worth insourcing it. I just don't think you get the resilience, and I'm sure we'll discuss that later in terms of what tipping points look like. But just looking at this really from a what needs to be outsourced base, if you look at motor, you know, I think FNOL, you know, whether that's just out of hours FNOL or 24/7 FNOL, it's going to be pretty hard for nearly all MGAs within the UK to stand up a 24/7 FNOL operation. It requires a lot of resource. Don't have the economies of scale to be able to offer it. It's not going to work. third-party capture, again, which is all about speed to get parties to stop them going into credit hire. That is a specialism. There's a lot of technology out there now. We've got some ourselves that I think is an important part to think about outsourcing. And I think probably most importantly on motor is repair management and engineering. How many MGAs have the scalability to set up their own repair network, so they're going to be accessing someone else's network. We do this for a number of large MGAs and insurers as well, where we provide those services I've just listed out, and the actual claims management is done by those through integrated technology. I think being able to build your own repair network is going to be really tricky. Flip that property side, again, FNOL, something you think about there. Loss adjusting, I don't think you're going to be able to insource that unless you've got absolutely humongous volumes. You're just not going to have the geographical coverage that you'd need, the technical expertise that you need to be able to do that. Something like subsidence, which is a really huge area for us that we claims manage, realistically, you're not going to be able to get the technical expertise that you need in-house to be able to do that. So that's an outsourced element. Underground services, sort of drainage, again, is something that you wouldn't do. Forensic surveying, repair management, and then across both property and motor, you look at things like fraud management and legals, and you think to yourself, do we have an appetite to take that in-house? So I think if you're designing this and thinking about what's best, you might have a small volume of claims where you think let's fully outsource this. It makes sense. It gives us cost certainty. We know what we're getting. We've got someone else that's contractually responsible for delivery. I think if you are thinking about insourcing this, I think for me, the starting point is that true desktop claims management that you can do, but you need to think really carefully about some of the adjacent services across both motor and property that I think lend best to outsourcing.
Okay, you mentioned tipping point earlier. Is there a tipping point for insourcing claims management?
So yeah, for me, I think there probably is. And again, this is coming from an outsourced provider. So I'm trying to be brutally honest here. And I think this is all about scalability and resilience. I mentioned earlier that if you've got a team of 4 and one leaves, or actually one's off sick, you're losing 25% of your workforce. And so I think when you're looking at your claims volumes, you need to factor that in. Every business loses staff. Every business has sickness, has holidays as well. The beauty of an outsourced arrangement is if we take that same piece of work and we employ 4 people to be able to do that claims handling, if we lose one, even if we lose 2, it could be sickness, could be holidays. We've got an operation of 500 people to be able to cover that work in the interim. An insourcing arrangement just wouldn't have that. So I think you need to get to a point where your volumes dictate an operational resource that gives you resilience to be able to suffer some of that and be able to cover it in the interim. Because what you're unlikely to get, we partner with a number of MGAs that do this, Nikki, is that we call it the hybrid model, as you know. We provide certain outsourced services and then they use claims management services themselves in-house, and we've got integration and technology or shared technology around that. What we won't sign up to is when things get sticky for them, they just chuck a load of claims over to us. And if we do sign up to that, there's a pretty hefty cost for it. So we want to partner with them. But again, same as those guys, we don't have people just sitting around doing nothing. And so I think when you're considering insourcing and outsourcing, the starting point is to look at the volume of claims that you're getting. Does that lend towards a team that's got the resilience to be able to deal with that, and the complexity of those claims? So if you're looking at relatively attritional, straightforward claim volume that you can recruit for pretty easily, then actually I think there probably does get to a point when you reach a certain volume, you say, actually, I think it's time to insource this and work with an outsourced provider to do the bits that we just can't set up ourselves. And that would be my view on that. Stu, have you got thoughts on that, particularly from a property perspective, I guess?
Yeah, I think the notable point you touched on there is beyond just thinking about your pure claims volumes. The complexity of claims is a major factor in this. And when you are thinking about insourcing, do you necessarily want, as you say, in a smaller MGA, for example, do you want 25% of your workforce potentially taken up on a small number but very complex set of claims? Or would you rather them focused elsewhere? And I think it takes it back to a consideration of scale in the whole. If you're a potentially larger MGA, then you can have a bit of a broader think in terms of, we've got really robust and well-established claims processes that support us in an insourcing model. Actually, if you're a smaller MGA, do you want to be taking up your staff's time when you maybe want to be focusing a bit more on your strategy, your growth, the relationships in the market, and importantly, your customers, which underpin all of that as well? versus getting them on a claims function. And I do think it's about striking that balance, and volume and complexity are the two key strands to steer towards that.
Thank you, Stuart. Chloe, do you have further comments on that? I mean, it's quite a balance that needs to be struck.
Absolutely, yeah, it absolutely is. And I echo what Gary and Stuart both said around scalability and resource and being able to manage large volumes. A small team of people has huge volatility. Undoubtedly, there is always going to be the need to outsource some provision through the specialist and expertise, but yeah, the capability, scalability and the resource piece. I think Stu touched on this earlier, but talent acquisition and retention is a real problem for businesses at the moment. I think there isn't, it's not just our industry, this is across the nation. We're in an environment where, post-COVID, remote working has been, has meant that competition is higher than ever before. People were beforehand were just going for sort of local jobs. You're underpinned around an hour commute from your home office. Now you can sit in your house in your home office, or you can sit in your log shed down the garden, and you could be working anywhere. There's opportunities. It's not just national, that's global. So it's a real big challenge for employers, I think, in being able to ensure that you can acquire the talent, but the retention piece. So not only have you got to think about the running of an operation and the claims element, you've also got to think about your employee engagement strategy. You've got to think about satisfaction. Further cost has got to be consideration with recruitment, with training, with development. Everyone knows that how hard it can be sometimes to get the right people in through the door. Sometimes you take a gamble, you get someone trained up, and then before you know it, that they've moved on to the next job, the next available opportunity. So those are all huge considerations that you can take on that burden yourself, and it's hard. Working in an operation where you've got high turnover, call center environment, it's a tough place to work, and it's also it's a constantly revolving door. So you can take on that burden yourself, insourcing it, and having done that myself, I know some of the challenges that faces. Or conversely, you go, do you know what, I can outsource this to somebody else, and get the guarantees that you're providing a service. There's a provision here, and you outsource that challenge and that problem to an outsource provider. It's
an interesting one, because we've touched on obviously staff retention, talent in the market. But what are the other current market dynamics that influence insourcing and outsourcing? People being one of the
people is certainly one of them. I mean, I'll talk from a motor perspective, and we absolutely can't shy away from the market conditions that across the motor industry, and property, but we've seen exponential rise in claims costs across the board. Everyone's experienced the issues with part delays, the distribution and supply chain, the microchip issue, new car production, courtesy cars, shortage of skilled labour. The list goes on and on. And I don't think that this is across the motor industry as a whole. And I think with these challenges comes lots of questions. How do we know we're managing against these market conditions? How do we know that we're doing a good job under the circumstance? What are the rest of the market doing to be able to combat some of these issues that we face, and what can we do differently? So these are all the sort of questions I think that, as an MGA, as a claims provider, those are the sort of right questions that you need to be asking yourself. I think press release after press release gives you some comfort that you're not on your own, with cost increasing, and everyone reporting core in production. Conversely. So look, I think having access to data though is probably what's going to be useful. Being able to benchmark performance. If you're operating siloed and don't have the partners potentially with that access to that big data, how do you know that you're doing a good job, or how do you know you're up there and being competitive in the market? I think being provided with insights around the market conditions, thinking about what things might predictions for the future, how those play out in the coming weeks and months, or even years. All of that stuff can help dictate underwriting decisions, can help dictate rating decisions. So, I think working with expertise and people, outsource providers to give you that ability and that extra insight, I think is got to be a key consideration.
I think Nikki, I think on that as well, I'm not going to tell everyone what the market conditions are in here, because I think everyone's probably well aware of that. But what that's manifested itself in is, really, really high claims inflation across both motor and property, the likes of which we've not seen for a very long time. And premiums and rates have not followed quickly enough. And so you look at all the press releases around loss ratios, and this generally comes from large insurers, but my understanding is MGAs have suffered the same. Loss ratios have crept. They've not been what they needed to be for the last 2 years. I always think in those sorts of circumstances, businesses look for a silver bullet solution to try to turn their fortunes around. And that can make them make knee-jerk decisions. And, as a claims person, I would say this, and if there's any underwriters in the session, I apologise. It's very rarely underwriters' fault. It's always we look at claims when cost is increasing. It must be something to do with what the claims teams are doing. All of this sort of stuff is putting us in a pretty unique position from a market perspective. What I would say is, those challenges are going to be challenges whether you're insourcing or outsourcing. I don't think that changes necessarily. I think it changes some of the thinking around it, but you're gonna face those regardless. And I think what we've seen historically, more so from insurers, is a bit of a cyclical move of insourcing to outsourcing. So we might have worked for an insurer for 20 years and the same work has been insourced and outsourced 3 or 4 times, moved it, and it depends on what they're trying to do from an OPEX perspective. They get a new CEO in and it changes direction in terms of what they're doing. What I would say is this is a really weird market at the moment. A lot of MJs, a lot of insurers are finding it hard. Rates are behind where they need to be. They need to stay competitive, they need to grow their book, all of those challenges that I think everyone is facing. What I would say is, consider that, but whatever your decision and your strategy is around insourcing or outsourcing, probably stick with it. Don't make knee-jerk reactions based on the market as it sits right there. If you've got a long-term strategy, build towards that, continue to build towards that. If that is outsourcing, have a look at whether the supplier that you've got is the correct one for you and the results are good. Do some independent benchmarking, talk to some of your insurance peers about what they're seeing to try to get a feel for what good looks like. Don't blame them if it's not them that's doing anything wrong. And if it is, look for a different solution.
Thank you. So we've talked about cost benefits and we've talked about the considerations. I think one of the things I'd like to touch on is, are customers managed better in-source or outsourced?
I think an interesting element of that, and I think Chloe touched on it briefly, is the COVID of everything sitting in the background when you're thinking about customers. So like we've chatted about, there's a raft of cost pressure sitting in the market. There's regulatory influences. I'm sure everyone probably listening has been impacted or influenced by the consumer duty requirements of this year. But customer behavior is changing, and that is a factor when you're thinking about the right model for insourcing and outsourcing. Customers are a bit more an on-demand beast is probably the best way to put it. Customers want to get updates. They want to hear what's going on with claims, with their insurance pretty swiftly, pretty immediately, in real time. And that very much has changed how we all need to behave and how we manage claims. And that is a key consideration for anyone when they are setting up a claims operation. Are you robustly set up enough to deal with customer queries, customer demand in an efficient way, in a robust way? Because it can be difficult. I'm sure everyone has dealt with a difficult customer here and there, and you want to do the best possible job for them. But sometimes there are realities of dealing with claims when you can't move things forward particularly quickly. as Gary mentioned, one of the bigger areas of our business deal with are subsidence claims. They are naturally longer tail claims than most claims, particularly in the property world when you contrast them with a general perils claim. There's a real difficulty there in keeping a customer feeling like their claim is moving forward and satisfied with the progress and that things are being done. And it does make it difficult because there's no, I think as Gary said earlier on, there's no silver bullet there to fix that beyond actually committing to doing what you say you will do for customers and doing your very best for them. And even that won't keep everyone happy.
Well, thank you for that. Any further input on customer? Because it's...
Yeah, Nikki, I think from my perspective, I mean, look, I don't think it's a black and white answer as to whether customers are managed better from an in-source or outsource perspective. I've seen both models where it's worked well. I've seen both models where it's worked really, really poorly. So I don't think that you can make an equivocation to say one is better than the other. I think there's probably three things that play into the way that the customer is, or I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if it's from you, Nikki. I'm just going to mute you. There are three things that play into the way that a customer is managed. So I think resource levels, whether we like it or not, resource levels are directly linked to customer satisfaction, I think. So I would encourage, of course, as an outsource provider, I would encourage every MGA to think about the fee basis that they're paying their suppliers, because it's going to be directly linked to the number of people that are placed onto an account. And claims fees for suppliers such as us have not moved with inflation over the last 10 years. And we understand that because there's an expectation that a degree of that will be built into operational efficiencies and advancements in technology. But my feeling is still that probably fee rates are a little bit behind where they need to be, and that impacts resource levels, which impacts the way that your customers are dealt with. Technology is a big part of this, which Stu was alluding to. There's a different expectation now from customers and policyholders about how they're treated, how they're dealt with, the immediacy, the access to information. I think that can be really tough for MGAs setting up their own in-source solutions to be able to have some of the technology that companies like IG and other TPAs have got for customers to access, whether that's automated messaging, online portals, videos, the lot. It's going to be really difficult to build that with an in-source team. So I think it's a compromise that you need to make. I think the third thing, talked about this at the start, is this notion that in-source teams will care more than outsource teams because it's their business. I think that's true on some occasions, but what I would say to everyone is if you're outsourcing to a TPA or claims supplier, I think it's incumbent upon you guys to make the claims team care as well. Our best performing teams are where we've got a really, really close relationship with the client, with the MGA, where their claims manager knows the name of everyone that works on their claims within the team, and where we have very distant relationships where, the claims manager at the MGA only really deals with their sort of senior management equivalent or their account manager. I don't think we get the investment from our people into the client in the way that we need to. So I think when we talk about control and caring, I think that it can work from an outsourced perspective, but it requires a bit of work from both parties to say, we want this to work. We want Dave, who sits in an IG office, to feel like he's working for ABC MGA. So we need to build a relationship for him and make him care and understand the direction that our business is going in. And I think that's a way that you can balance that customer piece out with an outsourced relationship.
Thank you. Chloe, do you have any comments on that from a motor perspective as well? I mean, key building relationships with the market, with your clients to ensure the customer is getting the best possible service?
Yeah, and I think, the customer aspect links to, all of the things we've discussed already, but certainly you're talking about customer service, but you're also looking at customer outcomes. We're looking at ultimately, what does a customer want from their claims provider, from their insurer? Look, it's compulsory insurance in a motor, yeah? It's not something that people are forced to buy. It's not something they want to. The costs are increasing. So with that, I think also comes an element of some higher expectations there. Last year my insurance premium was 400 quid. Now it's 900 quid. So what value am I getting from that? So that all has to be taken into context. So you need to be thinking about, we talk about the customer outcomes. If I'm a motor policy holder, I have an accident. For me, it's about getting my car repaired as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, with very minimal impact to my daily routine. I can still go and do the school run. I've got mobility. I've got a car whilst it's in the repair. So I think, you know, either way, in-source or outsource, it depends. Anyone can deliver. It's how you deliver those outcomes and how you best suit what it is that your customer needs. And you know, I think that's just the fundamental there, really.
Nikki, I think as well, sorry to jump in.
No, that's fine.
But when we speak to clients about insourcing versus outsourcing, I think that there are three reasons that they decide to insource primarily. So one is control. They think that they've got greater control over the team and what's happening. One is about the customer. And the third piece, and apologies, you might be coming to this, is around cost. I think there's a notion that it's cheaper to insource claims than it is to outsource. Now, you know, I think that would have to be done on a case-by-case basis, and, you know, the merits of that weighed up. But I think I did just want to touch on this because I think that there are a lot of hidden costs in terms of insourcing that everyone needs to be aware of as well. It's not quite as simple as saying, you know, we're not paying a profit margin to another business now, so it must be cheaper for us to do it. I think firstly, you generally get a degree of cost certainty with an outsourcing operation. You know, you've generally agreed a fee or a tariff of rates that you know is going to apply for a minimum of 12 months. Sometimes they do longer deals than that, you know, give you an understanding of what it's going to cost you for every claim that comes in. And that's, you know, that's attractive. But if you are insourcing, there's a number of cost factors that you need to think about. So you've got an in-house claim system that you'll need. They're not cheap, and the off-the-shelf stuff is okay, but invariably most businesses are going to want a bespoke version of some sort and some development around that. IT development is crazy costings right now if you're outsourcing that, so that's going to be expensive. You then got all the IT upkeep and provisions of that as well, which are ongoing. You've got pension costs, you've got office costs, which I mentioned earlier on. And also, you know, if your business changes direction, you know, you might be writing 50 million of premium motor right now, but actually next year, because of the way the market is, you decide that you're going to stop doing mass motor and you're going to move into sort of niche areas, which is going to take your GWP down to 25 million. That's going to reduce your claims numbers significantly. You're still sitting with a huge OPEX cost there that either you need to find other work to do or potentially even make redundant. And that's, you know, you need to have a lot of stability in your model to be able to think about insourcing. And I think, again, the beauty of outsourcing is that, you know, you'll agree some sort of volume commitments with your supplier, no doubt, but you get to sort of almost offset that and de-risk that from yourself and push that out and say it's not my problem. I think the last thing I think needs sort of considering this area as well is, you know, can you be bothered? You know, we're talking about merits here, but, you know, some people might just say, I can't be bothered to run an in-house claims team. You know, it's complicated, it's tricky. You know, he's referencing how tough it is to get people in these days, the skill shortage that we've got and the issues that we've got around that. You know, actually, you might say on merit, it might work, but can I be bothered to set something up? And I think it's you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of upkeep. I think it's something that everyone needs to think about as well.
Thank you for that. I think I'm touching on the fact, obviously, you talked about cost, and I think technology in claims handling is absolutely key in this forever changing market and technology forever changing. You've touched on that, and I think most of the panel touched on technology. But what role does technology play in claims handling and helping to reduce that cost and the impact on in-source versus outsource?
Feels like one for you first, Stu. I think you love a bit
I think, Stuart, you would add a lot of value to the technology piece.
Just because a guy has an I love spreadsheets mug, you instantly start pitting him as the nerd.
Absolutely.
It is really important, to be fair, and you know, it's evolving very quickly. Like my time in insurance, I feel like I have seen technology move forward quicker than pretty much anything else that I have seen. And I think some of that might be potentially because insurance was a little bit slow to embrace certain technology tech advancements and systems and so on. But now it is such a big topic for us all. And you can see the advantages in terms of streamlining your claims handling, in terms of automation, in terms of improving your customer experiences. I think Gary referenced earlier on a key thing for all of us, and I've obviously got my mug, is data. Like, data is absolutely invaluable when you are considering cost, when you're considering customer experience, when you are considering every aspect of your claims experience. It's invaluable, but there's a balance to actually getting that embedded and what you do with it. An outsourced provider is more likely to have a lot of the things pre-built. You don't have the upfront costs to be able to deliver on that. And you do have to strike that balance between, do we look to manage and importantly build this in-house, or do we rely on our tech-savvy partners out there in the market who can help us and look towards the future, working with them to what we can deliver together? And that does come with its own challenges and balances as well that you've got to factor in. So, important factors that you consider with every single outsourced provider partner is, your data security, your data processing, your integration. Is it easy? Is it simple? Do we get what we need out of that? Are we able to maintain it? Can we build it? Is it flexible enough? Like, there's a raft of considerations. And the good aspect of that when you are looking at an outsourced partner is, a lot of the time they've already been through that journey with someone else. They can hold your hand, they can walk you through it, versus you kind of going into the Wild West and figuring it out on your own.
Yeah. I think, Nikki, as well, TPAs work and win business based on competitive tender. And with that comes a requirement to continually innovate, develop things like technology. Because if we don't, we'll fall behind our competitors. And just going to mute you again, Nikki. I've got some background. We'll fall behind our competitors, and we won't win or retain business. So we're always looking for new tech advances. I also think that if you take a business like IG, we've got a huge number of clients across different sectors. We work with 6 or 7 of the largest 10 insurers in the UK. So we get to see all the technology that everyone is looking at as well. And it gives us a sort of pan-client view of what's out there, what's working as well. So, we get to see it road tested on particular clients before we might say it's got sort of cross-client appeal. And I think that is a big advantage of outsourcing. You've got a company that needs to innovate to survive, otherwise it won't do that. Has to have its eye on what the modern technologies within the market are, gets a cross-client view of what everyone's doing, and then a sort of bit of a better view of what works and what doesn't as well. So I think if you are considering insourcing, but you're huge on tech advancements, I think you're going to find it really, really difficult to balance those two. And I think you're probably going to get more brought to you from an outsourced partner than you are by insourcing your work.
Thank you for that, Gary. Chloe, do you have any further comments on technology from a multi perspective? I mean, they're going to be more or less the same challenges.
I mean, they're still the same challenge. I think when I first started in claims, I think we were still working on paper files. So, I mean, we've gone on leaps and bounds, to be fair.
I can echo that. I do remember that.
But for me, technology, I get what the rest of the panel is saying, but for me, technology is about what you can do to enhance the process. What can you plug in at key points to the journey? It's about agility and flexibility. There's got to be a cost saving element. It's less about, I think maybe 10 years ago, it was about huge transformative systems, and, we had great big projects going on, and, but this now, for me, this is technology that should be considered things that, sort of plug and play, that you can plug into your existing system, that you can change it. I mean, not change it at a moment's notice, but you've got that flexibility and agility to be able to move with the times, because, let's face it, 15 years, 20 years ago, we were on paper files. Now we're talking about automation and AI and robots, conducting claims assessments. So you need to be able to have that agility, that flexibility to drive those slicker processes, I think, going forwards.
I think we've definitely come a long way from paper files, which I remember dealing with. So yeah, that's thank you for that.
I think it's
moving
a really,
on.
just before we move on
Sorry,
quickly,
yeah.
I think it is a really important point you mentioned there, Chloe, which is like technology. This is it's a people-led industry, and that's us dealing with the claims, but also the customers out there. The best thing technology does is, and has done with taking things like paper files out of the equation, is free up time for the experts to deal with customers, to deal with their clients, and bring that value add for everyone and really enhance the claim experience. I think we often call it the moment of truth. Like, you don't really interact with your insurer unless something realistically has gone wrong after you've paid your premiums. So you want to deliver on that experience and you want to do a good job. And if you can get someone not having to do a meaningless admin, things that don't really bring the value, but having that extra time to speak to a customer, to speak to a policyholder, check in with them and let them know that you're delivering for them. As you say, when you're paying a increased premium for the year, it goes a really long way.
Thank you. So just moving on from technology and customers, are there any common misconceptions or challenges that organisations face when transitioning from one approach to another? And how could we mitigate that? I'm going to open this up to any one of you now.
Me, I'll go.
Go.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we've covered a few of these. I think the biggest one is that it's much cheaper to insource it. That you just see the fees that you're paying outsource and think, actually, I can take that. You know, if I'm spending £1 million, I can take that in house and do it for 500 grand. I think that's misleading because of all the supporting costs that goes around it. I think one thing that we have encountered when dealing with this is that businesses, MGAs and insurers can be surprised by TUPE implications. So you need to bear that in mind, that there is a TUPE implication to this as well, that you may be inheriting or taking over a significant number of people, some of which you might not even want, to be honest with you, but that is your responsibility, depending upon the contract that you've got with your supplier, but it's likely to be your responsibility to deal with that and to take those staff on in TUPE. So if you've got an outsourced supplier that you're giving 1,000 claims to and they are based in Manchester and you're setting a nice tidy office up in Kent thinking you'll be able to insource this, you're going to be getting all those people and you're either bearing the redundancy cost around that or you need to continue to employ those people. So I think that's a consideration that gets forgotten about. I think also as well, managing claims is pretty hard. You know, it's pretty tough. It's not easy. We deal, I think the guys have touched on it, but the expectations of customers are greater than ever. We've got rampant claims cost inflation. We're dealing with market circumstances, whether it's primarily motor property as well, where we've got delays on repairing vehicles that we've never seen before, parts delays that are unprecedented, microchips, that sort of thing. That's frustrating for customers that don't necessarily understand it. All they've seen is a significant increase in their premium over the last 12 months. And that is challenging. And actually, all the technology that we can develop doesn't necessarily satisfy the appetite for someone to want their car repaired within a week or their property restored within a week. That's just their expectation of what a claim looks like. And so I think as well that, over the last couple of years, it's really sad, but a lot of MGAs have gone to dust. That's just what's happened for a number of reasons. And I was thinking about this whilst we were preparing for it and looking at, the ones that I know that are no longer trading or no longer writing new business. What's their split between insource and outsource? And I think that there's a true split there, actually. There wasn't an overwhelming swing towards one or the other. I think it just plays into the fact that it's really challenging to manage claims, that claims are only a single element of what's going to make your business successful overall, and the underwriting needs to complement that. But, it's not easy, Nikki. And I think that very often when you're outsourcing to a supplier, you're managing regularly via a set of SLAs that are pretty binary in terms of whether they're good or not. We've got green and red and that's about it. And, one goes red of your 10 for 1 month. This isn't good enough. I'm on my laptop there. This isn't good enough. And, I think that's going to happen if you've got an in-source team as well, because there are challenges that are the same, whether you're insourcing or outsourcing it. So, there might be times that this makes sense, but be under no illusions that managing a claims team and managing a claims portfolio is incredibly tough.
Yeah, totally agree, especially when we have big surges and weather events like we're having one now. Stuart, Chloe, can you add further to Gary's comments regarding common misconceptions?
Yeah, I could take that. I mean, I think Gary touched on this, and just moving at the drop of a hat, you know, I think these types of decisions need some serious thought and consideration. It's not to say don't do it. It's not, and that's either way, in-source or outsource from either side of the fence, really. But I think to give yourself the best chance, you've got to. I think you've got to work. You know, if you're outsourcing, you've got to work in conjunction as a partnership cohesively, ensuring you're both aligned with the, you know, the outcomes that you're looking for, having, you know, service levels or archaic, or, you know, just thinking about future proofing. What is it that you want to achieve? You know, it can be difficult to move. It's not to say don't do it, because change, you know, you need to evolve, you need to move forward, but I think you need to continually reassess where you are, what your ambitions are, what your loss rate, you know, what things are contributing to your loss ratio, what things are contributing to your expense ratio, and what you need to do about that moving forward. So, you know, change can be hard. It's not to say don't do it, but you know, it's a challenging environment. So I think before people jump ship, I think you've got to be given that chance to move forward and look to the better outcomes.
Yeah, Nikki, just before Stu jumps in, one thing I will say is whether you're insourcing and considering outsourcing, or you're outsourcing currently and considering the other way round, I think it's important to open a dialogue with your supplier quickly. So yeah, businesses like ours are not afraid of you moving to an in-source relationship, model, as long as there's a continuing relationship. We understand our role in that and what we'll be working towards. And I think that dialogue is going to be important. But Chloe's right, it's a long-term thought-out process. It's not an overnight decision, that's for sure. Stu, sorry, I jumped in there.
Okay, I think you guys have probably covered everything, to be fair. I think the key thing, as you say, is it's a dialogue and transparency, and maybe, to be fair, when you chat about misconceptions, trying to set your expectations to one side for a second when you're entering these kind of partnerships and you're considering what the right model is for you. You don't want to go into something immediately thinking, right, we're insourcing our claims. That means we're going to be totally in control of everything. Everything will go great. We won't have any problems. It's smooth sailing. Equally, you go into an outsource model, you probably don't want to go straight into it and think this is going to save us a ton of money upfront immediately. It might pay off in the long term as you work with your strategic partners, as you establish what you all do well, play to each other's strengths and weaknesses. There's a lot of planning, a lot of due diligence, and a lot that goes into building these kind of models and getting the right kind of hybrid model for you. And I think the best thing you can do is just plan that openly with a dialogue and have that conversation. The best thing is, I think as Gary said, like effective communication. You will mitigate anything that will be a challenge, and you'll get the best possible outcomes with your partners that work for you, both for your in-house functions and anything that's outsourced.
Thank you, Stuart. Talking about that open and honest dialogue with your partners, what are the potential long-term strategic implications of insourcing versus outsourcing? Generally, with an in-house model, you have a 5 to 6 year plan going ahead. You know which direction you're going in, but we know how competitive and how dynamic this market can be. So with these open and long-term dialogues that you have, what would you say the strategic implications are for this ever dynamic changing market?
Yeah, I'll go first, Nick. I'll answer pretty quickly because we're running short of time. We need to do a wrap up. But I think whatever you decide, you need to be invested in it for a long period of time. You don't want to continue to flip flop on this sort of thing every couple of years. It is not easy to move from one to the other. So I think you need to look at the direction of travel of your business and where it's going. And you know, I'm aware that no MGA ever really says we're going to be smaller in 3 years' time. But I think when you're assessing this, you need to be seriously realistic about growth, about what direction you're going in, what your loss ratio and your profitability is going to look like, how that's impacted. And I think you need to play into what is a really, really long-term decision making around this, and not look at ambitious short-term plans that might end up burning you.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, the only thing to add to that really is, is just that review of, what is going to suit your outcomes in terms of your expense ratio, your loss ratio, and your customer. Make sure you're aligned to that, and you're true to your core. So, where are the gaps? What solution fits that? And you look at your internal capability versus your external opportunity, and you make the decision to suit your business strategy. That gives you that competitive advantage.
Thank you. Thank you for providing a very balanced insourcing and versus outsourcing debate. I hope everybody's found that useful across the market. I'm going to hand back to Gary now, who did our opening for us. But thank you everybody for such detailed responses today.
Cheers, Nikki. Thanks for hosting. Yeah, thanks everyone. We didn't get time to remind you guys that there's questions, but if there is anything, either pop it in the chat now, or if you want to follow up with either us directly or with the MGAA, please do so, and we'll follow up on those questions pretty quickly. I think, looking back at the learning objectives, it was all about understanding the benefits, risks, what lends best to a model, and I think we've probably covered that in a lot of detail. I think in summary, outsource to us if you want to. That's probably the best thing that you could do. But I think seriously, there's lots to consider for a business in terms of what suits them best, and it's all about your scale, about your size, your direction of travel, your appetite for risk as well. Lots of that plays into to that thinking. So I think unless there's anything else, thanks to Chloe, to Stu, to Nikki for hosting, and Tim, we'll hand back to you for any notes before we close off.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. And as Gary alluded to, just in terms of the learning objectives, they were describe the benefits of insourcing versus outsourcing, explain the risks of insourcing versus outsourcing, summarize how the current market dynamics influences decision making, and outline what the future holds. So hopefully you're all there after that excellent briefing. So thanks so much to Gary and the panel for your session today, which I'm sure everyone will agree has been very engaging. We've run out of time now for questions, unfortunately, but you can reach Gary at the email address that is shown on the slide. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing your last slide, Gary, that would be great. But alternatively, contact me at tim.richards@mgaa.co.uk with any questions. I'll be happy to pass those on. So just remains for me to say thanks all of you for joining us, and don't forget to provide your feedback. Do look out for forthcoming MGAA events. As always, hope you have a productive afternoon. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks again, Gary and the team, and see you all soon.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye. Bye-bye.